Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Jin-woo, the relentless Shadow Monarch, suddenly enters the Misfit of the Demon King Academy universe. What happens next? Let's find out. Jin-woo doesn't arrive in a burst of magic circles or royal fanfare. There's no prophecy announcing him, no demon elder sensing his presence. He simply appears, standing at the edge of a world obsessed with lineage, reincarnation, and measured power. The academy before him is magnificent and cruel by design, built to quantify dominance through magic capacity, origin bloodlines, and destructive potential. Every student here is ranked, judged, and cataloged down to the last drop of demon mana. It's a system that prides itself on being absolute, and Jin-woo walks into it carrying something this world doesn't have a name for. The first test is almost laughable. Crystals flare to life for everyone else, glowing violently under the pressure of demon kings and nobles. When Jin-woo places his hand on the artifact, it doesn't explode. It doesn't crack. It simply goes dark. The room freezes. Instructors whisper. Students laugh. 0 mana. 0 compatibility. Another failure destined for the Misfit class. Jin-woo says nothing. He's worn this label before. Weak, worthless, disposable. The difference now is that he knows exactly what he is, and more importantly, what they are not. As the academy continues its evaluations, Jin-woo watches closely. He studies spell structures, the way demon magic bends reality through authority rather than effort. He notices the arrogance baked into every incantation, the assumption that power must announce itself to be real. But beneath the polished hierarchy, Jin-woo senses fragility. This world's strength is loud, ceremonial, dependent on rules that everyone agrees to follow. His shadows stir uneasily, reacting to something unfamiliar, magic that rewrites outcomes, yet still obeys a system. When night falls over the academy, Jin-woo stands alone, overlooking towers built by reincarnated kings who believe they've already reached the pinnacle. The shadows stretch longer here, heavier. This isn't a battlefield yet. It's something far more dangerous. A world convinced it already understands power. And Jin-woo, silent and unreadable, realizes the truth before anyone else does. This academy doesn't measure the impossible. I'm about to meet it. The next morning, the academy moves on as if nothing unusual happened, but Jin-woo can feel the shift. Eyes linger on him a fraction longer. Whispers follow him through marble corridors lined with ancient demon sigils. To them, he's an error in the system, an empty value where something should be. To Jin-woo, the system itself is an anomaly. In his world, power was earned through death, repetition, and adaptation. Here, it's inherited, rehearsed, and celebrated. That difference matters more than anyone realizes. Practical combat assessment begins, and this is where the academy prides itself most. Controlled arenas, reinforced by spells meant to contain catastrophic output. Students summon infernos, distort gravity, tear open space with spells refined over countless reincarnations. The instructors nod approvingly, calling it proper demon king potential. Then Jin-woo steps forward. No chant, no magic circle, just stillness. The arena's detection spells scramble, unable to classify the energy forming around him. When the first attack reaches him, a blade of compressed demon mana, it doesn't shatter or rebound. It disappears, swallowed whole by a shadow that shouldn't have mass, yet bends space as if it does. Gasps ripple through the stands. Jin-woo moves, not fast but inevitable. His steps leave no magic trace, only pressure, like the world itself making room. When he counters, it isn't with destruction, but with presence. The shadow beneath his feet stretches unnaturally, latching onto the attacker's form, pinning them without injury, but with absolute control. The match is called off immediately, not because of danger, but because the academy has no rule for what just happened. Officials argue. Some claim it's a forbidden spell. Others insist it's an illusion. Jin-woo releases his opponent and walks away before a verdict is reached. He's not here to prove dominance, not yet. What interests him is the reaction of the world itself. The arena's barrier spells flicker, as if uncertain whether to recognize him as a participant or a threat. Later, in the Misfit dorms, Jin-woo senses something watching him. Not hostility, not curiosity, but awareness. A presence that doesn't rely on instruments or rankings. Somewhere within the academy, someone has noticed the shadows moving when they shouldn't. Someone who understands that power isn't always loud, and that silence can be more dangerous than any spell. Jin-woo looks up at the night sky, darker than it should be, and smiles faintly. This world has started asking questions, and it won't like the answers. By the third day, the academy's tone shifts from dismissal to discomfort. Jin-woo is no longer laughed at, he's avoided. Students who once flaunted their status now give him space, as if instinct warns them that proximity alone is a risk. The Misfit class, filled with rejects and irregulars, watches him with a mix of awe and unease. They can feel it too. The air around Jin-woo is heavier, like the aftermath of a battle that hasn't happened yet. Advanced theory lectures only widen the gap. Instructors speak of origin magic, of spells bound to the soul across lifetimes, of destruction that can erase concepts rather than bodies. Jin-woo listens politely, but inside, he compares it to the monarchs he's faced. Beings who didn't rewrite concepts, but enforced them. Death, obedience, eternity. Demon magic here is absolute because everyone agrees it is. Jin-woo's power never asked for permission. It took what remained after survival. During a spell analysis session, students are asked to manifest controlled destruction without collateral damage. One by one, they succeed, shaping explosions like art. When Jin-woo's turn comes, the instructors hesitate, then allow it. Confident the containment array can handle anything from a zero-mana misfit. Jin-woo exhales slowly. The shadows respond, spreading across the floor like ink dropped into water. There is no explosion, no light, just absence. The center of the arena feels hollow, as if something was removed rather than destroyed. The containment array doesn't activate because nothing registers as an attack. Silence crushes the room. For the first time, an instructor feels uncertainty, not fear, but doubt. If power can act without triggering defenses, then what is the academy truly measuring? Jin-woo steps back, shadows retracting obediently, and the hollow sensation fades. No damage, no proof, nothing to punish. And that terrifies them more than open rebellion ever could. That night, the academy's deeper mechanisms stir. Ancient wards placed by demon kings who feared the unknown activate quietly. Records are checked, reincarnation logs reviewed, bloodline archives searched. Sung Jin-woo isn't there, no past life, no origin signature. It's as if the world itself forgot to record him, or worse, was never meant to. Jin-woo feels it when he closes his eyes. The shadows whisper not of enemies, but of space, of a world layered on top of another, each claiming supremacy. He understands now. This academy doesn't test strength, it tests compatibility. And he is fundamentally incompatible. From a distant tower, unseen and unannounced, a presence observes the Misfit dorms with quiet interest. Not suspicion, not hostility. Recognition. Jin-woo opens his eyes. Someone powerful is finally paying attention. The attention doesn't arrive with confrontation. It never does, when the observer truly understands power. Jin-woo senses it the way a veteran hunter senses a boss monster before it reveals itself, an unnatural calm, a pressure that doesn't weigh down on the body, but on the world itself. The academy continues its routines, yet something fundamental has shifted. The rules are still being enforced, but they no longer feel absolute. They feel provisional. A closed-door evaluation is scheduled under the pretense of clarification. No audience, no rankings, just Jin-woo, a circle of high-level instructors, and artifacts designed to identify divine class anomalies. This time, they didn't ask him to release power. They ask him to exist. The moment the seals activate, the room darkens, not from shadow, but from depth. The instruments begin to register values, then overwrite themselves, unable to stabilize on a single state. Jin-woo stands motionless, hands at his sides, as the shadows beneath him stretch past the boundaries of the chamber, brushing against barriers meant to contain demon kings. One instructor attempts a probing spell, not an attack, but a diagnostic, a spell that traces the source of authority. It finds nothing. No origin, no reincarnation thread, no divine contract. Instead, it collapses inward, as if staring too long at Jin-woo erases the question itself. The spell shatters, not violently, quietly, like it realized it wasn't qualified to exist in his presence. The verdict is never spoken aloud, but it's understood. Sung Jin-woo cannot be ranked, cannot be sealed, cannot be defined by the Academy's logic without breaking it. So they do what systems always do when faced with something they can't control. They label him a misfit and pretend that solves the problem. Jin-woo leaves the chamber without ceremony. As he walks through the Academy grounds, students instinctively step aside, not because he demands it, but because something in them recognizes a predator that doesn't need to hunt. Above, the sky churns subtly, as if reacting to an existence it never accounted for. From the highest tower, the watcher smiles, not because Jin-woo is dangerous, but because he is interesting. And in a world ruled by demon kings who believe they've already seen everything, interest is the first crack in the foundation. Somewhere deep within the Academy, ancient truths begin to stir, aware at last that the greatest misfit was never the one who failed the system. It was the one who revealed its limits. The first real clash is unavoidable, not because Jin-woo seeks it out, but because a world built on dominance cannot tolerate something it cannot command. The Academy announces a large-scale combat exercise, the kind designed to showcase demon superiority and remind the misfits of their place. Multiple teams, live spellcasting, no lethal intent, but overwhelming force encouraged. To the instructors, it's a demonstration. To Jin-woo, it's a controlled environment revealing how this world truly fights. The moment the battle begins, demon magic floods the field like a storm. Spells overlap, amplify, rewrite each other mid-cast. Fire burns without heat, blades slice concepts instead of flesh. Time itself stutters under layered authority. Jin-woo moves through it all untouched, not protected, but ignored, as if the magic refuses to acknowledge him as a valid target. When a spell finally lands, it doesn't injure him. It informs him. He understands instantly how demon magic functions, belief reinforced by blood, authority enforced by agreement. That understanding is all he needs. The shadows rise, not summoned, not commanded, but responding. They peel themselves from the ground, stretching unnaturally as if the battlefield itself has chosen sides. The first shadow soldier forms silently behind Jin-woo, then another and another, each shaped by the fallen echoes of previous battles, not this one. Demon students freeze. These aren't illusions or familiars. They move with intent, memory, experience. An elite student charges, wielding a spell meant to erase regeneration entirely. Jin-woo allows it to strike. The spell tears through him, then stops, suspended in shadow like an insect trapped in amber. Jin-woo closes his hand. The magic collapses, not dispersed, but absorbed, its structure broken down and understood. The shadow soldier beside him shifts, adapting, now resistant to that very spell. Panic spreads. Demon magic is powerful because it overwhelms. Jin-woo's power does something far worse. It learns. Each attack strengthens his position. Each fallen combatant adds depth to his army. When a student is knocked unconscious, their shadow doesn't return to the ground. It waits. By the time instructors intervene, the battlefield no longer feels like a test. It feels like territory. Jin-woo doesn't even lift a finger at first. He walks through the battlefield, each step measured, each shadow soldier positioning itself without a word. The demon students attempt coordinated strikes, combining spells they've practiced for decades. A gravity-warping orb collides with a storm of black spears, and instead of exploding in destruction, the spells twist around the shadows, bending their trajectory back toward their casters. Panic intensifies, not because Jin-woo is destroying them, but because the battlefield no longer obeys them. Their magic obeys him. One by one, elite students try to flank him. Time-stop incantations, space displacement barriers, curses that should strip away existence itself. They all meet the same fate. The shadows adapt instantaneously, nullifying attacks in ways the Academy never accounted for. A lightning strike meant to shatter bones is absorbed into the shadows, and when it is released, it targets the caster, striking with precise accuracy. Every action taken against Jin-woo is rewritten. Every attempt at control is subverted, not by brute force, but by a cold, calculating inevitability. When a group attempts resurrection magic to bring back fallen students, Jin-woo observes quietly. His shadows move again, touching the bodies with a pulse that doesn't just restore, they enhance. The revived don't return as ordinary students. They become extensions of his army, shadows fused with memory and skill, aware of both the Academy's rules and Jin-woo's unspoken will. The students around them watch in disbelief as their peers now operate beyond their understanding, their power magnified by something they cannot see or measure. The Academy's instructors exchange worried glances. Spells designed to suppress rebellion fail to register on the shadow-infused warriors. They realize in an unspoken moment that this is no ordinary combatant. This is a new variable the system cannot calculate. Even the elite instructors step onto the battlefield, their faces grim as they unleash the most complex spells they have. Reality itself warps under their authority, yet the shadows bend around it, flowing and adapting like water finding its path. Attempts to trap Jin-woo in sealed zones fail. The shadows move beyond containment, adapting to space, time, and intent simultaneously. Each strike is returned, but not recklessly. Instead, the Academy witnesses the terrifying precision of someone who doesn't need to act aggressively to dominate completely. The battlefield has transformed. It's no longer a test. It's a demonstration of an unclassifiable force. Jin-woo pauses midfield. For a moment, he is still. The shadows stretch taller, darker, heavier, as if feeding on the chaos around them. Students who have trained for decades watch their spells crumble before their eyes. The whispers begin, the first murmurs of fear, of reverence, of disbelief. The Academy's finest have learned a truth they cannot admit. This is not a student. This is something far beyond the concept of origin magic, bloodline, or reincarnation. This is the embodiment of inevitability. The battlefield is no longer a place of practice. It has become a theater of absolute lawlessness, but a lawlessness with rules of its own. Jin-woo doesn't need to fight aggressively. His presence alone reshapes every spell cast against him. A group of high-ranking demon nobles forms a circle, combining their authority to create a sealing array designed to neutralize him. Firestorms of magical energy erupt around him, Earth itself trembling from their combined might. To anyone else, this would be the pinnacle of power. To Jin-woo, it is an invitation. He steps forward slowly, shadows crawling over the scorched ground, absorbing stray embers and fragments of magic like a sponge. As he moves, the sealing array begins to buckle, not from force, but from comprehension. The shadows infiltrate the complex weave of authority, breaking down each strand in seconds. Nobles scream, not because they are injured, but because their spells betray them, collapsing inward without explanation. The students around the field falter, some freezing mid-spell as if realizing that everything they have been taught about dominance and hierarchy no longer applies. One student, desperate and skilled beyond most, hurls a curse meant to erase not just existence, but the memories of those who oppose it. It strikes, and for a heartbeat, it seems Jin-woo might be affected. But the shadows respond instantly. The curse is absorbed, analyzed, and restructured. When it releases, it doesn't harm Jin-woo. It rewinds upon the caster, unraveling their own memories of the attack for just a fraction of a second, enough to destabilize their focus. Panic spreads through the battlefield, infecting even the most confident combatants. Then the resurrection magic is attempted again, this time on a larger scale, with multiple fallen students summoned back at once. The shadows move like a dark tide, not just intercepting but integrating them. The revived no longer resemble what they once were. They are enhanced soldiers, attuned to Jin-woo's unspoken commands, capable of predicting the movements and spells of their former comrades with terrifying accuracy. Observers can only watch as the Academy systems designed to measure and categorize power collapse under the weight of something entirely new. By mid-battle, the instructors and elite nobles realize a horrifying truth. Jin-woo doesn't merely counter magic. He adapts to it, internalizes it, and grows stronger because of it. Spells that are intended to kill become tools that reinforce his army. Reality-warping attacks meant to assert dominance are twisted back, teaching him the limits of the Academy's authority. Every strike strengthens his presence. Every failed attempt weakens their confidence. Even the most experienced demon lords hesitate to intervene directly. And then at the climax of this chaos, a student attempts a forbidden spell, one meant to erase the very essence of life from the battlefield. It's an act of desperation, a gamble to stop what they cannot understand. Jin-woo's shadows respond instantly. They don't block, they don't deflect. They consume the energy of the spell, breaking it down into its fundamental components. Then, with chilling precision, they return it, not as destruction, but as a mirror of intent, reflecting the spell's power back upon the caster in controlled doses. The student collapses, overwhelmed but alive, a clear message that this is not destruction for the sake of destruction. This is control, absolute and unchallengeable. As the dust settles, the battlefield lies in eerie silence. The Academy's elite and their students, exhausted and shaken, realize something fundamental. The system they built to measure power has been invalidated. Their magic, hierarchy, and centuries of structured authority mean nothing to this Shadow Monarch who moves beyond rules, beyond measurement, beyond fear. And in that silence, one undeniable fact becomes clear. The Misfit of the Demon Academy has met its match. And it is not the Academy that dominates the Shadow Monarch. It is the Shadow Monarch who dominates the Academy. By the time the instructors regain enough composure to speak, it's too late. The battlefield no longer looks like an arena. It resembles the aftermath of a war the Academy never intended to fight. Craters of magical energy puncture the ground, residual arcs of corrupted spells flicker in midair, and the shadows of fallen students stretch across the terrain like living reminders of what just happened. But no one is dead, at least not in the traditional sense. Every attack that should have ended life has been rewritten, repurposed, and stored as strength for Jin-woo's shadow army. The students, trembling, whisper to one another. What they just witnessed defies every rule they've ever learned. Authority means nothing. Bloodlines mean nothing. Power is no longer measured in the terms they understand. Even the instructors, those who have seen decades of wars, immortal magic, and reincarnated kings, cannot hide the unease in their eyes. They begin to grasp the terrifying reality. Song Jin-woo isn't just strong. He's a force that transcends the very foundation of their world. The Academy is a meticulously structured system built to categorize, limit, and control magical potential. Jin-woo exists outside of it entirely, not because he breaks rules, but because he renders rules irrelevant. Every incantation, every ancient spell, every protective measure is either neutralized or assimilated into his growing influence. The Misfit of the Demon Academy was meant to highlight flaws in the system, but Jin-woo himself becomes the embodiment of that flaw, the unpredictable anomaly that no calculation can contain. As the shadows recede and Jin-woo walks silently to the edge of the arena, his army follows, not in formation, but in instinctive cohesion. Each shadow soldier carries the essence of a fallen opponent, integrated and loyal. The elite students, exhausted and terrified, cannot even formulate an effective response. Their greatest spells, combined through years of study and ancestral power, have failed to touch him. He doesn't boast. He doesn't taunt. He simply is. And that presence alone reshapes the perception of everyone who dared to oppose him. The Academy's rules, the rigid hierarchy, the obsession with origin and lineage, all of it crumbles silently in the wake of his existence. A distant tower, long unapproachable even to the Academy's most powerful members, stirs. The presence that has been observing Jin-woo since his arrival finally moves, acknowledging the battlefield. Not with alarm, but with interest. Someone powerful, someone who understands the implications, is taking notice. For the first time, a part of this world, the part that enforces ultimate authority, recognizes that Jin-woo is no ordinary misfit. He is something else entirely. By the end of the day, the instructors are forced to convene. Their discussion is hushed, full of fear and disbelief. The system they've relied on for centuries has been tested and failed. And the one who failed it isn't even trying. The students are left to ponder a terrifying truth. The Shadow Monarch doesn't merely confront power. He consumes, adapts, and grows from it. The misfit of the Demon Academy has met its reckoning, and it has lost. Jin-woo walks away from the arena without a backward glance. The shadows trail silently behind him, stretching over the grounds like a dark tide. The Academy remains standing, but it feels fundamentally altered, as if the world itself has shifted to accommodate the presence of something it cannot categorize. And somewhere in the upper echelons of the Academy, a figure smiles knowingly. Not out of fear, not out of malice, but because a new variable has entered the game. And the world of demon kings has finally been forced to admit what it never wanted to see. Sung Jin-woo, the Shadow Monarch, is not a student. He is an evolution. The misfit of the Demon Academy may have been created to expose flaws, but Jin-woo exposes far more than flaws. He exposes limits, limits that the world had never imagined could be crossed. And as he disappears into the twilight of the demon realm, the first whispers spread among students and nobles alike. The Shadow Monarch has arrived, and nothing will ever be the same. Word spreads quickly across the misfit of the Demon King Academy. Not through official channels, not through announcements, but through subtle tremors in the magical network itself. Students whisper about the figure whose shadows defy every law, whose presence bends authority, whose very being refuses to be measured. And yet, for all the panic and fascination Jin-woo inspires, none of it reaches the attention of Anos Voldigoad immediately. Anos isn't concerned with misfits, anomalies, or even threats that the world labels as unclassifiable. He's concerned with balance, with understanding where power originates, and with anomalies that could disrupt reality itself. And somewhere, amidst the Academy's sprawling halls and layers of spell-laden wards, he senses it. A presence that is not just powerful, but fundamentally different. Anos doesn't appear in grandiose fashion. There are no explosions, no sweeping magical effects that announce his arrival. He watches quietly, analyzing. Students and instructors alike feel a ripple of unease, but none can pinpoint the cause. The subtle tremor in magical energy, the way shadows stretch unnaturally around a single figure, hints at a force that isn't native to their calculations. Anos observes Jin-woo in the arena from afar, noting how he moves not with brute force, but with inevitability. The Shadow Monarch doesn't need to attack to dominate. The battlefield obeys him willingly, as if acknowledging a higher, unspoken authority. This is what draws Anos's attention. Not arrogance, not rebellion, but raw existential difference. Curiosity, rare in someone of Anos's experience, compels him to act. He doesn't confront Jin-woo immediately. He watches, noting every adaptation, every absorption of demon magic, every shadow soldier that rises. What intrigues him is how Jin-woo interacts with the world around him. In this universe, power is absolute if you belong to it. Jin-woo doesn't belong, and yet he surpasses it anyway. That alone is enough to pique Anos's interest. He senses the unique pattern of Jin-woo's growth, the silent calculus that allows him to turn attacks into reinforcements, spells into lessons, and enemies into extensions of himself. It's a methodology that no demon, no noble, and no student could replicate, because it isn't taught. It's innate. Anos's presence finally manifests subtly, almost imperceptibly, during a high-stakes evaluation the Academy holds for its Misfit class. Students are asked to recreate devastating spells under the observation of elite instructors, meant to assess both control and potential. Jin-woo participates as he always does, calm, silent, shadows adjusting to every threat without apparent effort. Spells that should destroy him instead vanish or, worse, return twisted, altered, made more efficient by his army of shadows. Anos observes, analyzing how each action, each adaptation, reveals not just raw strength, but an understanding of causality that transcends magic itself. To Anos, Jin-woo is no ordinary anomaly. He is a force that refuses to acknowledge the limitations imposed by origin, reincarnation, or hierarchy. And in that refusal, he becomes fascinating. Deciding that observation alone is insufficient, Anos makes his presence known, subtle, indirect, and almost imperceptible to all but Jin-woo. The air around the Academy thickens, magic recoils slightly, and shadows shiver as if sensing a predator far beyond their reckoning. Jin-woo pauses, sensing for the first time an opponent who is not merely powerful but aware. Anos doesn't attack, he doesn't test him overtly. Instead, he gauges, measures, and challenges him in ways that the world cannot comprehend. The shadows instinctively respond, positioning themselves between Jin-woo and this new observer, not in fear, but in recognition. For the first time, Jin-woo encounters someone whose presence questions him without a word, without a strike, without a display. It is a confrontation not of violence, but of awareness, and it rattles the foundations of the Academy more than any battle could. Jin-woo recognizes the subtle threat immediately. Anos's aura is unlike any opponent he has faced before. It doesn't bend reality in the way that spells do. It is reality, shaped by absolute will and intent. Jin-woo doesn't flinch, doesn't speak, but his shadows stir, responding to the pressure, adapting to a presence that cannot be measured in force or speed. The surrounding students feel a shift, sensing the clash of forces invisible to their eyes, but palpable to their souls. The Academy itself seems to pause, caught between the Shadow Monarch and the Demon King, both aware of the other in ways that bypass ordinary understanding. What happens next isn't a fight, at least not in the conventional sense. Instead, it is a test of existence itself, a silent battle of philosophy, instinct, and intent. Anos doesn't seek to destroy Jin-woo because destruction would be meaningless. He seeks to understand him. And Jin-woo, as always, does not seek dominance for its own sake. He reacts, adapts, and prepares. In this moment, two of the most dangerous beings in existence stand opposite each other, separated by ideology, presence, and an unspoken acknowledgement. This encounter will change the world around them. The tension between them is almost tangible. Anos doesn't move forward, doesn't cast a spell, but his presence presses against Jin-woo like a weightless wall. It's not force in the conventional sense. There are no explosions, no lightning arcs, but the very laws of the Academy shiver under his awareness. Shadows twitch, instruments falter. Even the students' magical signatures wobble as if reality itself is recalibrating to account for the unmeasurable. Jin-woo feels it immediately. This is not another student, not another king. This is something far older, far deeper, and far more absolute. His instincts flare, not in fear, but in recognition. He does not need to attack to assert himself. His presence alone adapts to this new variable. Anos studies him carefully. Every movement, every subtle shift in the shadows, every adaptation Jin-woo makes is noted. He is curious, almost entertained. Because Jin-woo does not fight like anyone else. The Academy has taught its elite that dominance is a combination of lineage, power, and authority. Jin-woo disregards all three. He doesn't mimic them. He doesn't oppose them directly. He exists alongside them in a way the system never anticipated. That is what catches Anos's attention. Here is someone who is powerful, but his power is not born of conformity. It grows organically, shaped by necessity, adaptation, and survival. That is a dangerous combination, one that even a demon king cannot ignore. Without warning, Anos alters the battlefield in a subtle way. Not a strike, not a spell, but a shift in the flow of magical energy. The shadows respond instinctively, flowing outward, probing the change, adapting to maintain balance around Jin-woo. The students and instructors who watch are too inexperienced to perceive the nuance. They only feel the ripple of something wrong, something impossible. For them, this is chaos. For Anos and Jin-woo, it is a test, a quiet duel without a single punch or incantation, a conversation written in the language of presence, control, and adaptation. Jin-woo observes, understanding the magnitude immediately. Anos isn't testing raw strength. He's testing comprehension. He wants to see how Jin-woo reacts to forces beyond the Academy's definitions, beyond the known limits of magic and authority. And Jin-woo, as always, reacts instinctively. The shadows do not strike, they do not attack. They shift, align, and extend, probing the invisible currents of energy, mirroring the unseen pressure Anos exerts. The Academy itself seems to pause. Students stop mid-spell, instructors hesitate mid-command, and even the ambient magical wards stutter as if unsure how to respond to the anomaly unfolding. For the first time, Jin-woo experiences a presence that does not challenge him in terms of power, but in terms of existence. Everything he has faced before, monsters, monarchs, and impossibly strong foes, reacted to him as a threat or a target. Anos does neither. He does not threaten, he observes. He does not attack, he evaluates. And that, more than any spell, more than any army of shadows, forces Jin-woo to adapt on a level deeper than combat, a battle of awareness, instincts, and potential. The surrounding academy feels the shift in subtle waves. Students sense something monumental. Shadows twitch nervously. Even the elite instructors exchange uneasy glances, noting that the presence pressing against Jin-woo is unlike anything they've ever encountered. It isn't simply power, it's inevitability. And when inevitability faces inevitability, the world itself seems to hold its breath. Jin-woo moves slightly, testing the boundaries, observing how the pressure reacts. A small ripple, a flicker in the shadows, a faint response in the ambient magical energy. And Anos notes it. A silent acknowledgement passes between them. Both recognize the other as an existence beyond the world's understanding. Neither smiles, neither speaks. Yet the entire academy feels the magnitude of this encounter. For the students, it is terrifying. For the instructors, it is incomprehensible. For Jin-woo and Anos, it is the beginning of a dialogue without words, a collision of philosophies, instinct, and the raw nature of power. One adapts, the other evaluates. And in the space between, the misfit of the Demon Academy stands on the precipice of a reckoning unlike any it has ever known. The silent standoff stretches, yet every second pulses with unspoken tension. Jin-woo shifts a fraction of a step, and the shadows ripple outward like liquid night, probing the unseen presence that watches him. Anos responds in kind, not with spells, not with attacks, but with subtle shifts in the flow of magical energy, so faint that even the Academy's elite struggle to perceive it. It is a confrontation without combat, a duel of understanding and instinct. Each tests the other, learning, measuring, predicting, yet neither strikes. And that is the true danger. The world itself begins to feel unstable under the weight of two beings who operate beyond its rules. Students whisper and peer from a distance, unsure whether to watch or flee. Some misfits, emboldened by Jin-woo's mere presence, hide behind the shadows of his soldiers. Others tremble at the subtle pressure, feeling it in their bones even if they cannot comprehend it intellectually. Instructors attempt to maintain order, but even they sense something is amiss. The academy, a structure designed to measure and control power, begins to falter. Spells stall mid-air, wards flicker, and magical artifacts hum erratically, unsure whether to register Jin-woo or the force observing him. The entire system quivers under the encounter. Jin-woo doesn't speak. Anos doesn't speak. Communication occurs through instinct and presence. Each movement, each minor adjustment is a statement of awareness, a subtle declaration of capability. Jin-woo subtly tests boundaries, sending a shadow soldier forward not to attack, but to gauge Anos's response. The shadows adapt instantly to the invisible force, flowing around it without confrontation, mimicking, analyzing, learning. Anos, in return, subtly alters the fabric of magical energy in the area, introducing variables that shouldn't exist, attempting to observe how the Shadow Monarch reacts to phenomena entirely outside his universe's rules. It is an exchange of intelligence, reflex, and adaptation at speeds far beyond human perception. The Academy students are aware only of the tension, the distortion in the air, and the subtle flickering of shadows. They do not see the calculations, the adjustments, the constant silent evaluation that both beings perform. Each interaction strengthens understanding without a single visible strike. Jin-woo's shadows learn from the anomalies Anos introduces, adapting instantaneously, reinforcing the principle that his power is not simply destructive, it is evolutionary. Anos finally shifts slightly, causing the battlefield's ambient energy to distort, simulating extreme combat conditions without striking a single blow. Shadows react, stretching and contracting, probing the unstable flows, learning patterns, and preparing contingencies. The subtle exchange demonstrates the principle behind Jin-woo's strength, adaptation. He doesn't merely counterattacks, he understands the framework of force itself, predicts its outcome, and integrates it into his own potential. Anos studies this with careful interest. No other being has ever approached power in such a manner. It is not raw strength, nor immortality, nor authority. It is inevitability, and it fascinates him. As the minutes stretch into hours, the standoff becomes more than a test. It is a phenomenon. Students, teachers, and nobles who sense the interaction without fully perceiving it begin to whisper rumors. The academy, structured around measurement and hierarchy, cannot account for it. Leaders of the Misfit class, who once feared Jin-woo, now feel a mixture of awe and terror, sensing the magnitude of his presence. Even the most arrogant nobles, who consider themselves untouchable, feel an existential unease. The world they believe they understand is being rewritten in real time, and the cause is invisible yet undeniable. Then, finally, a subtle acknowledgement passes between Jin-woo and Anos. Neither moves aggressively, neither speaks, but the tension releases slightly, as if both understand that they are not yet enemies, but variables in an experiment neither has fully designed. The shadows retract to a more relaxed stance, and Anos's invisible aura settles into a measured observation. The academy, still trembling under the subtle interaction, registers the quiet truth. Two beings, each beyond comprehension, have collided without a single spell cast, and even now, the students cannot see the true scale of what has occurred. In the distance, an observer from the upper towers takes note of the subtle shifts. The elite instructors, whispering urgently among themselves, finally realize something no one in the academy has acknowledged aloud. Sung Jin-woo is not merely a misfit. He is an existential anomaly, and the presence of Anos Voldigoad has confirmed it. Two forces beyond measure, beyond classification, now occupy the same space, testing the boundaries of the world itself. For the academy and its inhabitants, the realization is terrifying. The misfit of the Demon Academy has become something far greater than the system was built to contain. And the Shadow Monarch now faces a being who can evaluate, challenge, and potentially surpass the limits of everything they know. The stage is set, the world holds its breath, and the encounter between Jin-woo and Anos has only just begun. By now, the academy itself seems to have fallen silent, as if the very walls and wards are holding their breath. The magical instruments that once measured strength, the indicators that dictated rank and capability, flicker erratically, failing to provide accurate readings. Even the most seasoned instructors, the ones who have seen hundreds of battles and generations of reincarnated demon kings, are forced to acknowledge something unsettling. Sung Jin-woo exists outside the system, and the fact that Anos Voldigoad is observing him only magnifies the anomaly. This isn't merely a student or even a misfit. It's a being whose power and awareness redefine the boundaries of the Academy's reality itself. Jin-woo takes a deliberate step forward, and the shadows respond as always, flowing and adjusting, almost sentient in their coordination. Anos, though still mostly unseen, shifts the ambient magical currents subtly, testing, probing, and analyzing the Shadow Monarch's adaptability. Jin-woo's movements are deliberate but minimal. He doesn't strike, doesn't cast, doesn't boast, yet every micro-adjustment of his body, every subtle ripple of his shadows conveys a clear message. He understands. He understands the anomalies, the limitations, the hierarchy, and the invisible calculations shaping the battlefield. He is not aggressive. He is inevitable. Anos responds similarly, altering environmental energy and magical currents in ways that challenge comprehension. Tiny distortions in space, fluctuations in time perception, and layered magical constructs ripple through the arena, invisible to all but Jin-woo. The Shadow Monarch reacts instinctively, the shadows absorbing, adapting, and preparing responses to phenomena the Academy's most powerful mages would struggle to perceive, let alone counter. Every attempted observation from Anos is met with subtle resistance, a quiet counterbalance that is not hostility, but perfect calibration. It's a dance of perception, control, and evolution. The surrounding students, who can only perceive the echoes of this interaction, begin to sense the impossible. Spells in their hands falter, magical wards tremble, and even the elite instructors realize that what is occurring is beyond their understanding. Whispers circulate. It's not just Jin-woo, it's something else entirely. Misfits who once feared their own peers now glance at Jin-woo with awe. Nobles who considered themselves untouchable feel an unfamiliar weight of existential dread. Even those at the very top, watching from distant towers, can only observe the subtle, terrifying ripple of events. Two beings beyond comprehension have collided, and the world itself is bending to accommodate them. Jin-woo finally stops moving. The shadows settle like a dark tide around him, neither aggressive nor passive, simply present, anticipating, calculating. Anos's influence continues, faint but unmistakable, a pressure that challenges existence itself. They have not exchanged blows, spells, or words, and yet the impact on the battlefield and on the Academy is seismic. It is a confrontation that transcends physicality, one that plays out on the level of perception, instinct, and raw existential awareness. For the first time, both beings acknowledge a mutual understanding. They are not enemies, not yet, but they are forces that cannot ignore one another. The students, instructors, and nobles remain frozen, unsure what to make of it. They feel the weight, sense the impossibility, but cannot interpret it. Only one truth is clear. Sung Jin-woo is not simply a misfit, he is an evolution. And Anos Voldigoad, with all his experience, power, and insight, recognizes that he is witnessing something entirely new, a being whose existence challenges the very nature of magical authority, hierarchy, and origin. As the tension slowly ebbs, Jin-woo and Anos retreat, though not in defeat or submission, but in mutual acknowledgement. The shadows recede, Anos's presence relaxes slightly, and the Academy exhales collectively, though uneasily. The world has been tested. The system has been challenged. And the misfit of the Demon Academy now stands confirmed not only as an anomaly, but as a phenomenon that even the Demon King himself cannot fully quantify. For the first time, a ripple of understanding passes between them. This encounter is not a battle. It is a reckoning. The implications are staggering. Jin-woo adapts, evolves, and grows, while Anos observes, evaluates, and challenges him in ways no one else could. The Misfit of the Demon Academy has become something the world has never seen before, and the stage is set for a confrontation that will shake the very foundations of reality, magic, and power itself. The academy, the students, the instructors, and even the surrounding magical world will never be the same. And in the quiet aftermath, one truth resonates louder than any spell or authority. Jin-woo, the Shadow Monarch, has caught the attention of Anos Voldigoad, and nothing in this universe or any other will ever measure up the same way again. The calm after the encounter with Anos Voldigoad is fragile, so fragile that even the smallest ripple threatens to shatter the fragile order of the demon world. Jin-woo's presence is no longer a mere curiosity. It has become a catalyst. Within the academy and beyond, magical instruments begin to fail, wards tremble, and the very rules that bind demons, nobles, and monarchs start to twist under the weight of his existence. Students whisper in terror as spells that once worked flawlessly begin to misfire, rebound, or vanish entirely. Entire classes of misfits stare in awe as their lessons, carefully calibrated to measure ability, are suddenly meaningless in the face of shadows that adapt, absorb, and evolve instantaneously. It begins subtly. A high-ranking noble attempts to summon a powerful firestorm, a spell designed to erase everything within its radius. It erupts, but instead of obeying the caster's will, the fire bends, cracks, and twists. Redirected by shadows Jin-woo doesn't even consciously command. The noble's control falters. Panic sets in. He realizes, too late, that the firestorm isn't destroyed. It has been repurposed, transformed into a weapon for the Shadow Monarch. Around the academy, other students and instructors experience similar anomalies. Gravity distortions, time-slowing spells, and barriers designed to last centuries flicker and collapse, failing to account for a force that does not exist within the measured parameters of the world. Demon lords convene urgently, sensing the existential shift. Ancient rulers, whose authority has gone unchallenged for centuries, feel the ground beneath them tremble, not from an attack, but from the simple fact that something is rewriting the laws they've relied upon. Hierarchies crumble quietly. Their spells of control, designed to enforce obedience, now falter. Entire bloodlines tremble as the realization sinks in. Jin-woo's shadows, his army, and his very presence do not acknowledge lineage, pedigree, or magical authority. Traditional power means nothing. Command structures break down. Even the strongest monarchs sense the fragility of their dominance when faced with a being who exists beyond their definitions. Jin-woo doesn't move aggressively through this chaos. He doesn't need to. Every step, every subtle adjustment of his army begins to expose the cracks in a world that assumed itself unbreakable. Shadow soldiers emerge quietly, pulling themselves from the edges of broken spells, from the echoes of failed incantations, and from the very mana of fallen students. Each addition strengthens him not just physically, but conceptually. He is becoming a force that the academy cannot calculate. Demon soldiers attempt to counter. Elite nobles cast their most powerful bindings. Even origin-level magic users intervene. But every action is anticipated, adapted to, or absorbed. The world, once rigid and hierarchical, begins to bend around Jin-woo like water flowing through cracks in stone. The first catastrophic rupture occurs when a collective offensive of the academy's most powerful nobles fails outright. A coordinated spell combining earth-shattering fire, destructive wind, and reality-warping void magic erupts with full force against Jin-woo. The battlefield is torn asunder, but instead of harming him, the attack enriches his shadows. The firestorm fuels their power. The void strengthens their resilience, and the wind disperses to create new formations. Elite nobles scream in disbelief as the very spells meant to dominate him are converted into tools of his inevitability. Their authority, sacred and absolute, proves powerless against adaptation that transcends logic. As panic spreads, rumors of Jin-woo's unstoppable power reach the farthest corners of the demon realm. Teachers, nobles, and even rival academies begin to tremble, not knowing if they are witnessing a student surpassing their masters or a force that could unravel the very fabric of their world. The Misfit of the Demon Academy was already a subject of whispers and disbelief, but now it becomes a legend in real time, a presence that challenges centuries of established hierarchy. And the Academy's wards, reinforced by spells placed by ancient demon kings, begin to fail. Protective sigils crack, containment barriers flicker, and mana circulation destabilizes, as if the world itself questions whether it has the right to resist. Entire classrooms feel the impact, not physically, but conceptually. Magic that once defined limits now collapses under the weight of unpredictability. Students who once prided themselves on control realize that mastery means nothing against a power that cannot be measured. The Misfit of the Demon Academy becomes a nexus of chaos and adaptation. Shadows move autonomously, infiltrating spaces that should be impossible, interfacing with spells that should be untouchable. Even resurrection magic, once a sacred and controlled ability, begins to function differently under Jin-woo's influence. Fallen students and minor demons rise not as they were, but as extensions of his shadow army, each enhanced by his presence, each carrying residual knowledge and instinct from their former lives. The Academy's fundamental assumption that magic obeys its hierarchy crumbles. Outside the Academy, the wider demon world begins to tremble. Noble houses feel the echoes of lost control, as if an invisible hand has rewritten the rules they've relied upon for millennia. Magical constructs used for surveillance and enforcement fail outright. Ancient wards guarding entire cities flicker or collapse. Bloodlines that prided themselves on unbroken authority are forced to acknowledge cracks in their dominion. Jin-woo's presence does not destroy for the sake of chaos. It exposes instability and forces the world to confront its own fragility. The first confrontations between shadow soldiers and elite demon knights result in complete unpredictability. Knights, trained for decades to annihilate enemies, discover their attacks redirected, mirrored, or turned against themselves, not violently, but with absolute efficiency. Their strategy becomes meaningless. The Academy, built to measure skill and power, cannot anticipate or account for a being who adapts instantaneously, whose army grows exponentially from the remnants of every failed attack. Even Anos, observing from the background, notes the widening gap. What began as interest has now escalated into something unprecedented. Jin-woo is no longer a student or an anomaly. He is a force capable of rewriting the balance of the entire demon world. And the world, once rigid, orderly, and absolute, begins to fracture around him. The tremors of instability spread outward from the Academy like ripples in a storm-tossed lake. Entire districts feel it. The reinforced wards that protect noble estates flicker and sputter, as if questioning the legitimacy of those they were sworn to guard. Bloodlines that prided themselves on perfection feel the pressure of uncertainty. Young nobles practicing spells of authority sense their incantations faltering, while veterans who have survived hundreds of battles feel a creeping dread they cannot shake. Even the Misfit of the Demon Academy, long treated as a minor concern, now commands attention on a scale that defies imagination. Jin-woo moves silently through this shifting landscape. His shadows are no longer just an army. They are extensions of his will, autonomous and adaptive beyond any human or demon understanding. They probe broken wards, intercept spells mid-flight, and consume energy meant for containment or attack, converting it into strength. Each shadow soldier carries the residual essence of spells, fallen students, or even minor demons, reinforcing the concept that Jin-woo doesn't simply survive the chaos, he feeds on it. Nobles attempt coordinated countermeasures, combining fire, lightning, and void magic in a desperate bid to halt the spread of his influence. But their efforts are systematically absorbed or neutralized. The battlefield, or rather the Academy grounds, begins to resemble a living organism reshaping itself around him. Rumors spread like wildfire. Students whisper of a presence that bends reality itself. Nobles debate whether Jin-woo is truly a student, a demon, or something entirely outside their understanding. Even distant academies sense fluctuations in magical energy that should be impossible to detect at such ranges. Reports of uncontrolled spell anomalies, wards failing, and spontaneous shadow manifestations reach the ears of the highest-ranking demon lords. Panic, subtle at first, begins to solidify into fear. They have ruled unchallenged for centuries. Yet here's a being who doesn't respect tradition, hierarchy, or authority. The first elite intervention fails spectacularly. A coalition of origin-level magic users attempts to suppress Jin-woo using a layered spell that combines time distortion, spatial compression, and absolute nullification fields. The spell erupts with terrifying energy, threatening to collapse the entire academy if it fails. But it does not fail. It is assimilated. Shadows stretch, absorb, and restructure the attack, leaving the origin-level mages stunned. Their authority, power, and experience mean nothing in the face of adaptation that transcends even their understanding. Panic escalates as they witness not destruction, but perfect counterbalance, as if Jin-woo's power has a logic of its own that cannot be violated. With the Academy's defenses crumbling, the students themselves are caught in the crossfire. Even those aligned with Jin-woo begin to notice the subtle strain. Spells they thought mastered misfire or evolve unexpectedly, shadows flicker and twist unpredictably, and the very fabric of reality bends beneath the weight of Jin-woo's silent command. Observation, calculation, and instinct merge into an unstoppable feedback loop. The more the Academy resists, the stronger his presence becomes. By nightfall, the first cracks appear in the infrastructure of the demon world beyond the Academy. Magical surveillance networks fail. Wards protecting key territories flicker, allowing minor anomalies to manifest unchecked. Nobles attempt to assert dominance over these rogue manifestations, only to find their spells warped or nullified. Entire districts become zones of unpredictability. Civilians, minor demons, and students alike begin to notice. This is no ordinary disruption. Something fundamental in the world itself has begun to unravel. Jin-woo's shadows continue to extend, integrating with the unstable magical energy. Fallen students, unbound demons, and residual spell forces are absorbed into his army, each element reinforcing not only his physical strength, but the very principle of inevitability he embodies. What was once a static, orderly world is now fluid, reactive, and ultimately unpredictable. Each failed countermeasure, each corrupted ward, each nullified attack is a lesson and reinforcement for the Shadow Monarch. Meanwhile, the elite instructors, once confident in the Academy's authority, scramble to coordinate a response. But even their most sophisticated magical constructs falter. Protective sigils shatter, elemental wards collapse, spells designed to dominate, punish, or even observe Jin-woo are rendered ineffective or repurposed. The Academy's hierarchy, long thought absolute, begins to fracture. Bloodlines squabble as desperation seeps into strategy. Even the highest-ranking demon lords hesitate, aware that direct action could escalate instability beyond their control. And through it all, Jin-woo does not boast. He does not attack indiscriminately. He simply exists, and the world around him reshapes itself accordingly. The demon world, long built on rules, hierarchy, and authority, is learning for the first time that existence itself can bend, break, and evolve beyond its constraints. The chaos spreads like wildfire, subtle at first but accelerating exponentially. Entire noble districts, previously fortified with layers of ancestral magic, begin to show signs of failure. Wards shimmer, protective sigils falter, and ancient seals, some older than recorded history, crack under the strain. The moment a spell fails, it isn't just ineffective, it is repurposed. Energy meant to dominate, destroy, or control is quietly absorbed into Jin-woo's shadows, fueling an expansion of his influence that the world cannot predict or contain. Even the elite demon lords, who have ruled for centuries with absolute authority, feel the creeping sense of vulnerability that comes when rules themselves fail. Inside the academy, students are caught between awe and terror. Shadows slip through walls, floors, and even magical barriers, moving as if reality itself bends to Jin-woo's presence. Attempts at containment, counterspells, and coordinated attacks fail systematically. Students who once relied on bloodline privileges or elite training see their techniques falter, their authority nullified by a force that requires no effort to dominate. Whispers spread like contagion. He is not just powerful, he is the world itself, bending. Fear spreads faster than magic, undermining even the most confident minds. Outside the academy, the destabilization accelerates. Cities anchored by centuries-old wards flicker as mana circuits overload. Magical communication systems fail, leaving noble houses isolated. Territories once thought secure are now unpredictable zones where spells misfire, environmental control breaks down, and rogue anomalies appear. Minor demons, previously subdued, move with a freedom that terrifies those who have relied on hierarchy for survival. Entire ecosystems of magical enforcement begin to crumble, and with each failure, Jin-woo's army of shadows quietly absorbs and repurposes the residual energy, growing exponentially in strength and scale. Elite intervention fails repeatedly. A coalition of noble spellcasters, origin-level demons, and even high-ranking Misfit instructors attempts to suppress Jin-woo using complex, multi-layered bindings, reality-warping fields, and concept-targeting magic. Each attack, meant to overwhelm, instead strengthens him. The shadows adapt instantly, neutralizing attacks without overt confrontation. Some attacks are reflected subtly, not to destroy, but to teach the attackers the futility of their effort. Panic escalates, frustration mounts, and cracks appear in the very hierarchy the coalition was built to defend. Bloodline tensions flare. Noble families, long accustomed to unquestioned authority, begin to clash over failed interventions. Each family seeks to assert dominance, only to find their spells hijacked or nullified by shadows that operate beyond their comprehension. Old rivalries erupt into chaos, with wards and protective spells that once safeguarded entire estates failing unpredictably. The aristocracy's traditional power structure is unraveling, quietly but relentlessly. In the academy, shadows expand methodically. Fallen students and minor demons are absorbed into Jin-woo's army, each unit integrating knowledge, combat skills, and magical affinity. The academy grounds become a network of autonomous forces, capable of defending, attacking, and adapting simultaneously. Even attempts at coordinated resistance from elite instructors fail, as every plan is anticipated and mitigated by the ever-expanding intelligence of Jin-woo's shadows. The battlefield is no longer one of combat. It is a living system, adapting, learning, and evolving in real time. By now, entire districts report magical anomalies. Surveillance constructs collapse or move unpredictably. Protective wards flicker or fail, and chaos spreads among the lower-ranking nobles and civilians alike. Panic permeates every layer of society, not because Jin-woo is actively hostile, but because his presence invalidates the very foundations of authority, hierarchy, and magical order. The world, which once prided itself on structure and predictability, begins to fracture under the weight of one being's existence. Even Annos Voldigoad, observing from a distance, acknowledges the scale of the disruption. He sees not just the raw power, but the systematic, unavoidable transformation of an entire magical ecosystem. Jin-woo is no longer merely surviving or adapting. He is reshaping reality, redefining the parameters of dominance, and exposing every flaw in the centuries-old structures of the demon world. As night falls over the academy and surrounding territories, the cracks become visible in both magic and perception. The hierarchy that has ruled unchallenged for millennia is fractured. Nobles argue over failed spells. Students fear their own abilities. Wards that once promised safety flicker like dying stars. And through it all, Jin-woo stands silently, his shadows expanding, observing and assimilating every failed attempt to control him. The demon world built on rules, authority, and hierarchy is breaking, not from external invasion, but from a single presence that refuses to obey, submit, or conform. The Shadow Monarch is not just a threat to individuals. He is a threat to the very concept of order. And as his shadows stretch across the crumbling battlefield, the world realizes an uncomfortable truth. No system, no hierarchy, no bloodline is prepared to face inevitability incarnate. By the time the sun rises over the shattered academy, the damage is undeniable. Wards that once stood for centuries are fractured, sigils meant to enforce obedience flicker and vanish, and the students, instructors, and nobles alike are left grappling with a reality they no longer understand. The demon world itself seems to recoil under the weight of Sung Jin-woo's presence. Streets once patrolled by vigilant knights are now eerily quiet, as minor demons, empowered by residual shadow energy, move with a freedom that terrifies even the most seasoned warriors. Entire districts feel the subtle but unmistakable pressures of a force that cannot be contained, measured, or predicted. Elite demon lords convene urgently, their faces grim beneath layers of ancestral armor. They realize that this is not merely a disruption. It is a systematic unraveling of every hierarchy, tradition, and rule they have depended upon for centuries. Attempts to coordinate mass suppression fail spectacularly. Spells designed to dominate fail to register. Binding arrays crumble mid-cast, and attacks intended to overpower Jin-woo's shadows are absorbed and repurposed with terrifying efficiency. Every failed effort feeds the Shadow Monarch, strengthening him and expanding his influence. Panic spreads in the noble ranks, amplified by the realization that their authority is meaningless in the presence of someone whose very existence defies the rules they have built their lives around. Meanwhile, the academy itself teeters on the brink of collapse. Classrooms, once filled with structured lessons and controlled magical exercises, are transformed into zones of unpredictable chaos. Shadows slip through walls and floors, intermingling with residual magical energy, effectively turning the environment into an extension of Jin-woo's will. Teachers who once prided themselves on discipline and control find their instructions failing to register. Spells misfire or backfire, leaving them vulnerable to minor demons now enhanced by shadow integration. Even the most confident students, who had previously excelled in magic manipulation, feel the unnerving pressure of a system that no longer obeys the logic of the world. Noble bloodlines, long accustomed to unchallenged dominance, fracture in response to the growing instability. Families clash over failed interventions, each attempting to assert control only to find themselves undermined by forces beyond their comprehension. Ancient wards that once secured entire estates flicker and collapse, leaving previously protected territories exposed to chaos. The ripple effect spreads outward. Minor demons, freed from centuries of control, exploit the weakened system, attacking where they wish, reorganizing and even allying with Jin-woo's shadow network without instruction. The demon world is no longer orderly. It is alive, reactive, and adapting to the Shadow Monarch's inevitable expansion. By midday, the elite instructors recognize a horrifying truth. Sung Jin-woo's presence is not simply disruptive, it is evolutionary. He does not fight in conventional terms. He does not destroy recklessly. He absorbs, adapts, and integrates everything around him. Failed spells, fallen students, residual mana from destroyed wards, all are assimilated into his shadows, transforming each anomaly into reinforcement. Every effort to resist contributes to his dominance, creating a feedback loop of inevitability that the demon world cannot counter. The Academy system, built over centuries, designed to measure and control power, has been invalidated. Even Voldigoad, observing the unfolding chaos from a distance, notes the unprecedented scale of the disruption. He sees not just power, but a systemic rewriting of the magical ecosystem itself. Jin-woo is not merely surviving the collapse, he is orchestrating it silently, methodically, and without malice. This is not domination for ego or conquest. It is a natural extension of his adaptability, his shadows, and his understanding of the principles that govern power and existence. By nightfall, the demon world is barely recognizable. Entire cities experience fluctuating magic, protective wards fail sporadically, and rogue spells wreak havoc across districts. The academy is fractured into zones of unpredictability, where neither noble authority nor instructor oversight holds. Shadow soldiers patrol autonomously, integrating fallen students, absorbed magical energy, and even residual elemental forces into a cohesive, ever-evolving army. The scale of Jin-woo's influence has become so vast that the demon world itself begins to feel like an extension of his will. And in the quiet moments between the collapsing wards and the flickering sigils, one truth emerges with chilling clarity. The demon world, built on centuries of hierarchy, tradition, and controlled authority, is breaking. Not due to invasion, not due to conflict, but because Sung Jin-woo exists. His shadows, his adaptation, his inevitability, they are rewriting the rules of existence itself. The demon world has never faced a force like this, and for the first time in its history, every monarch, noble, and misfit realizes that the system they have relied upon is no longer absolute. The Shadow Monarch stands amidst the chaos, silent, composed, and unstoppable. His shadows stretch over the academy and beyond, a dark tide that absorbs, adapts, and evolves continuously. The noble houses, the instructors, the students, they all watch in awe and terror as the first real reckoning of the demon world begins. And somewhere in the distance, unseen yet perceptive, Voldigoad notes with interest that what is happening is no longer an isolated anomaly. It is a transformation. The world itself is bending to the presence of Sung Jin-woo, and nothing will ever be the same again. Imagine this: Sung Jin-woo, the inevitable, standing amid a world unraveling beneath his shadows, has become more than a student, more than a monarch. He has become a force of transformation. The Misfit of the Demon King Academy, long celebrated for exposing flaws in the rigid systems of demons, suddenly seems small in comparison. Jin-woo doesn't just break rules, he obliterates the very concept of limitation. Authority, hierarchy, and magic itself bend, fracture, and evolve around him. What was once a system designed to define and measure power is now a playground for his shadows, his will, and his inescapable presence. The Academy's elite, who had once prided themselves on centuries of mastery, are now scrambling to comprehend what they are witnessing. Instructors, nobles, and even the students who once mocked misfits now find themselves dwarfed by an existence that defies calculation. Jin-woo does not attack recklessly. He does not need to. His mere presence transforms the battlefield into an ecosystem of adaptation. Shadows crawl over broken wards, infiltrate collapsed sigils, and integrate magical anomalies into a cohesive force that no single spell, no hierarchy, and no bloodline can counter. Every failed intervention by nobles only strengthens his network, reinforcing the lesson that the world cannot contain someone who transcends rules entirely. From the highest towers of the Academy to the farthest reaches of demon districts, the ripples of Jin-woo's arrival are felt. Spell networks flicker unpredictably, surveillance wards collapse, and even minor demons move with unprecedented autonomy, subtly influenced by the energy of his shadows. He doesn't command them explicitly. His existence is enough to restructure their priorities. The world itself begins to obey him, not through fear or allegiance, but through the inevitability that anything resisting him will either evolve or collapse. Nobles attempt to intervene, casting layered, complex bindings designed to suppress or even erase him. but the shadows simply adapt. The attacks are neither blocked nor countered in the traditional sense. They are absorbed, reinterpreted, and transformed into tools for expansion. Even the legendary Voldigoad, observing this from afar, recognizes the depth of what is happening. Where most would see chaos, Anos sees a principle at work, a method of evolution that bypasses hierarchy, lineage, and magical authority. Jin-woo doesn't just dominate power, he redefines it, making every attempt to challenge him a lesson and a reinforcement simultaneously. The Misfit of the Demon Academy was meant to challenge the system, to expose weakness. But Jin-woo elevates that principle exponentially. He is not a misfit by definition. He is the true embodiment of unpredictability, a force whose influence cannot be confined, measured, or countered. As the night deepens over the fractured academy, the full scale of his impact becomes visible. Students who once considered themselves prodigies falter mid-incantation as shadows absorb residual mana and memories, transforming each failed spell into a lesson for Jin-woo's expanding army. Nobles scramble to assert dominance, only to find their authority nullified. Protective wards flicker, then fail entirely, exposing entire districts to the subtle yet overwhelming influence of the Shadow Monarch. Even ancient sigils placed by previous demon kings to ensure control are rendered ineffective. The world itself is bending around him, learning to adapt, and in doing so acknowledging a truth that no scholar, instructor, or ruler has ever faced. Sung Jin-woo is not merely powerful, he is inevitable. In the heart of the academy, the misfit of the Demon Academy, Anos Voldigoad finally steps forward. Not to attack, not to test in the traditional sense, but to observe the full scope of what Jin-woo represents. Where the academy students and instructors see chaos, Anos sees evolution. Where nobles see broken hierarchy, he sees the emergence of a new order, one defined not by bloodline, pedigree, or authority, but by adaptation, resilience, and the uncompromising inevitability of existence itself. Jin-woo does not need to assert himself against Anos. Their interaction is a mutual acknowledgement of power beyond measure. The stage is no longer student versus system. It is a confrontation of existential magnitude, and Jin-woo stands unshaken. Meanwhile, across the demon world, whispers of his dominance spread. Cities once thought secure flicker under the subtle pressure of his shadows. Rogue spells gain sentience under his influence, and minor demons adapt and evolve far faster than the system anticipated. Entire factions of nobles are paralyzed by indecision, unable to assert authority, unsure whether to flee, resist, or submit. The misfit of the Demon Academy was always meant to highlight the flaws of the institution, but Jin-woo becomes the living proof that the academy, the nobility, and even the foundation of demon hierarchy cannot contain true evolution. The academy's elite convene in desperation, attempting to formulate a strategy against a force that cannot be measured, predicted, or restrained. Magical blueprints, carefully layered wards, and centuries-old incantations are hurriedly prepared, yet even their most sophisticated designs falter before the simple inevitability of Jin-woo's presence. Spells meant to bind or neutralize him twist upon casting, absorbed by shadows that learn instantaneously, repurposing each attack into reinforcement for their master. Each failed intervention is both a lesson and a demonstration. The misfit of the Demon King Academy is no longer a student, no longer a threat. It is the axis around which the world is beginning to pivot. Jin-woo moves deliberately, though never hastily. His shadows spread methodically, filling every corridor, every hall, every abandoned battlefield left in the wake of collapsing wards. The academy structures, once rigid and imposing, tremble beneath the pressure. Protective sigils glow faintly before flickering out, unable to resist the subtle gravitational pull of inevitability that Jin-woo radiates. The very architecture of the school seems to bend around him, shadows threading through cracks, weaving around wards, and asserting a quiet dominance that requires no violence. Students and instructors alike are caught between awe and terror, unable to act, unable to comprehend, and powerless to interfere. Beyond the academy, the wider demon world reacts in real time. Noble houses attempt coordinated interventions, sending battalions of elite demons and powerful mages to suppress the rising tide of shadows. Yet even from a distance, the influence of the Shadow Monarch's presence warps outcomes. Spells misfire, formations collapse, and high-ranking demons fall, not through brute force, but through the subtle impossibility of defying someone whose existence alone reshapes the battlefield. Entire territories, once secure under centuries of magical reinforcement, now flicker unpredictably. Wards failing here, surveillance constructs collapsing there. The demon world is learning that resistance is a concept rendered meaningless in the face of Jin-woo's inevitability. Meanwhile, Jin-woo's shadows evolve continuously. Fallen students, minor demons, residual spell energy, all are absorbed and reorganized into new forms capable of autonomous action while maintaining coordination with the Shadow Monarch's will. Each shadow acts as both an extension of Jin-woo and a node in a vast living network, adapting instantly to threats, environmental changes, and even the subtle manipulations of high-level magic users. The Academy's elite attempt to strategize, but every plan is instantly tested, every contingency met, and every prediction absorbed into an ever-expanding intelligence network. The Misfit of the Demon King Academy is not just surviving, he is transforming the very rules of survival. Voldigoad observes silently, intrigued. Where other powers focus on raw destruction, Jin-woo demonstrates something different. Efficient evolution. He does not annihilate the world around him recklessly. He adapts, integrates, and strengthens through interaction with chaos. Anos recognizes that the Shadow Monarch is not merely powerful, he is redefining what it means to be beyond power. Whereas the Misfit of the Demon Academy had previously exposed flaws in authority through audacity and intelligence, Jin-woo exposes them through existential inevitability. Rules, hierarchies, and centuries of accumulated knowledge are meaningless when faced with someone who operates outside their parameters entirely. In the academy itself, panic is now widespread. Students who once trained rigorously in spells of domination or manipulation falter as their magic misfires or transforms unexpectedly. Instructors attempt to assert control over the chaos, only to find that their most precise calculations are rendered useless by the Shadow's adaptability. Even elite nobles, who once ruled with unquestioned authority, hesitate and falter, recognizing that their centuries of dominance have no bearing against a being whose very existence challenges the laws of their universe. By nightfall, the academy has become a labyrinth of instability. Shadows stalk the halls autonomously, filling cracks in the wards and strengthening themselves with every failed spell or collapsing sigil. Students move cautiously, instructors issue fragmented commands, and noble intervention falters. Jin-woo does not need to raise his hand. His presence alone suffices to bend the system around him. The Misfit of the Demon King Academy, once a symbol of disruption, now seems dwarfed by the sheer magnitude of what Jin-woo represents, a living, evolving force capable of rewriting the rules of the entire demon world. The stage is now set for the ultimate realization. Nobles, students, and instructors alike begin to understand that Sung Jin-woo is not merely challenging the academy, he is transforming it. He is not a student, nor merely a Shadow Monarch. He is the true Misfit, a singularity of inevitability around which the world itself is bending. Every failed intervention, every misfired spell, every crumbling ward contributes to his ascension. And in the quiet observation of Voldigoad, the world witnesses something that has never occurred in its history. A being whose influence transcends authority, hierarchy, and even the laws of magic themselves. The Demon King Academy, long a symbol of rigid hierarchy and unchallenged authority, is now a stage for the extraordinary. Jin-woo's shadows move like living threads across the fractured landscape, filling spaces once dominated by wards and protective sigils. Every corner of the academy feels his presence, subtle yet undeniable. Students whisper in terror and awe, instructors shout frantic commands only to see their spells nullified, and nobles convene behind trembling gates, realizing that no strategy, no incantation, and no lineage can confront what has become inevitability incarnate. The Misfit of the Demon King Academy has always exposed weakness, but Jin-woo doesn't just expose it, he annihilates its relevance entirely. As the elite instructors attempt to coordinate a final containment, Jin-woo demonstrates why he is more than a student, more than a monarch. He is an anomaly of existence. Layered arrays of origin-level spells designed to immobilize or suppress him fail immediately. Their energy is siphoned, redirected, and integrated into his shadow army. Fallen students are restored not to their former selves, but as autonomous extensions of Jin-woo's will, carrying knowledge, skill, and instinct far beyond their original capacity. Spells that would have destroyed cities are neutralized in midair, warped into energy flows that reinforce his dominance. Every act meant to challenge him only expands his power, demonstrating a principle beyond brute strength: adaptation, inevitability, and mastery of the unseen. Nobles watching from distant towers feel the pressure of impossibility. The carefully maintained social and magical hierarchy that has ruled the demon world for centuries is breaking apart. Bloodlines quarrel as attempts to assert dominance fail, leaving estates vulnerable to subtle infiltration by shadows that operate independently yet harmoniously with Jin-woo's will. The elite forces dispatched to subdue him return, not defeated in conventional combat, but transformed. Bound by residual shadow energy, aware of the futility of resistance, and inadvertently strengthening the very presence they were meant to suppress. Every effort against him becomes fuel, further confirming the truth. He is no misfit in the ordinary sense. He is the true misfit, the apex of evolution within the academy and beyond. Within the academy itself, panic and awe intermingle. Classrooms become chaotic zones where magic misfires, elemental wards collapse, and students, unable to comprehend the scale of adaptation, stumble in terror. Shadows infiltrate every corner, learning, reinforcing, and responding to stimuli before anyone can even notice. Teachers attempt to reassert order, only to find that the system they have depended on for centuries is now subordinate to a force they cannot quantify. Even the elite instructors, who once prided themselves on control over the most complex spells, realize that they are observers in a phenomenon they cannot interfere with. The Misfit of the Demon King Academy was always meant to disrupt. But Jin-woo elevates disruption into existential transformation. Meanwhile, Anos Voldigoad watches quietly. He does not intervene, does not challenge, yet his presence acknowledges the magnitude of the unfolding events. He observes not merely the chaos, but the principle behind it, the adaptability, the absorption, and the transformation that Jin-woo embodies. Where others see disruption, Anos sees an evolution in action. The Shadow Monarch's ability to integrate failed spells, fallen students, and magical anomalies into a coherent, ever-expanding force is unparalleled. Even Anos, whose own power transcends conventional limits, notes the singularity of Jin-woo's presence. This is not merely strength, it is inevitability, a force that cannot be ignored, contained, or rivaled within the known frameworks of the demon world. By nightfall, the academy is transformed beyond recognition. Wards flicker and fail, protective sigils crumble, and entire zones are now under the subtle yet complete influence of Jin-woo's shadows. Even minor demons move autonomously, influenced by residual energy, yet acting cohesively as if guided by an invisible hand. The once rigid hierarchy is fractured, with noble families scrambling to regain control, students unsure of allegiance, and instructors watching helplessly as the system they rely upon collapses. Each failure reinforces Jin-woo's dominance, teaching the world that the Misfit of the Demon King Academy is no ordinary anomaly. At this point, the full truth becomes undeniable. Jin-woo is not simply a student, not merely a powerful figure, and not even just a Shadow Monarch. He is a force of nature, a living testament that rules, authority, and hierarchy are subordinate to adaptation, inevitability, and understanding. Every shadow, every absorbed spell, every restructured ward contributes to his inescapable influence. The demon world, once structured and predictable, is now bending and fracturing around him. The stage is set for a revelation no one anticipated. Jin-woo is the true misfit of the Demon King Academy, not because he is rebellious or unconventional, but because he transcends the very foundation of what the Academy represents. His presence challenges everything. The hierarchy of nobles, the authority of instructors, the power of monarchs, and the very principles of magic itself. And in this fracture, amidst chaos, awe, and terror, the demon world begins to realize a chilling truth. The real misfit is not one who defies rules, but one who exists beyond them entirely. The dawn after the chaos rises over a transformed Demon King Academy, yet nothing feels the same. Jin-woo stands amidst shadows that ripple and twist like living extensions of his will, a silent sentinel over a world that can no longer function according to its old rules. Nobles, instructors, and even the elite misfits look on in awe and terror, each recognizing that what they had considered the pinnacle of power and order is now subordinate to a force beyond comprehension. Jin-woo does not raise a hand, he does not roar. He simply exists, and the Academy bends, fractures, and evolves around him. The true scale of his influence becomes undeniable. Shadows patrol autonomously, restoring collapsed wards, stabilizing rogue spells, and integrating fallen students into a cohesive, ever-growing army. Even elite origin-level magic users find their spells reversed or redirected, not in attack but in reinforcement. Jin-woo's presence is not destruction, it is adaptation at a scale so vast that no system, no hierarchy, no principle of the demon world can contain it. Cities that once relied on ancestral wards flicker under his influence. Rogue demons gain autonomy, and the noble bloodlines quake under the realization that centuries of dominance mean nothing against inevitability incarnate. Voldigoad observes from afar, intrigued and measured. He recognizes a principle few others can comprehend. Jin-woo is more than a master of shadows, more than a manipulator of force. He is a living force of evolution. Every attack against him, every failed attempt to suppress his growth only strengthens his adaptability. Every spell repurposed, every shadow integrated, every fallen student absorbed becomes a lesson in inevitability. What the misfit of the Demon King Academy achieved through disruption, Jin-woo achieves through existential transformation. He doesn't merely break the system, he rewrites it on the fly, expanding beyond the very notion of control. Across the academy, panic and awe intermingle in equal measure. Students who once prided themselves on mastery falter mid-incantation. Instructors watch helplessly as rules fail, and nobles realize that their authority has been neutralized, not by force, but by the simple inevitability of his existence. Entire classrooms have become autonomous zones where magic no longer obeys its traditional laws, yet functions perfectly under the subtle guidance of the Shadow Monarch. Even minor demons, absorbed into his network, act with precise autonomy, reinforcing the lesson that Jin-woo is not a being to be defeated. He is a world-defining principle that must be acknowledged. By nightfall, the Academy and the surrounding demon world have fully adapted, or perhaps been forced, to accommodate him. Shadows stretch into distant territories. Residual energy from failed spells and broken wards fuels his army, and the previously rigid hierarchy of nobility and instructors has fractured irreparably. No noble bloodline, no centuries-old ward, no combination of spells or strategy can contest him. The realization spreads like wildfire. Jin-woo is not just a student, not just a misfit, not even just a Shadow Monarch. He is the true misfit, the apex of adaptation and inevitability, a force beyond control, hierarchy, or magic itself. Anos, silent and observing, finally allows a subtle acknowledgement to pass, a rare nod to another being whose existence transcends conventional understanding. This is not an enemy, nor a rival. This is something entirely different. Jin-woo does not need recognition, but the acknowledgement reinforces what the world is beginning to accept: the misfit of the Demon King. Academy was merely a glimpse of what is possible, but Sung Jin-woo embodies the full realization of that principle. He is the culmination of inevitability, evolution, and absolute mastery, a being who turns chaos into order on his terms. In the aftermath, the demon world stands transformed. Institutions once rigid and unchallenged are fractured, noble bloodlines weakened, and the very foundation of magic is now a system that must reckon with adaptation beyond comprehension. Students, instructors, and nobles alike understand that Sung Jin-woo is not just powerful. He is a world-altering force, a presence that bends reality to inevitability. The Academy, once the pinnacle of order and hierarchy, now exists in a new state, one defined by the lessons imparted silently by the Shadow Monarch. Power is not about control, lineage, or authority. It is about evolution, adaptability, and the inescapable truth of inevitability. And so the world comes to an uneasy, reverent understanding. Sung Jin-woo, the Shadow Monarch, the true misfit of the Demon King Academy, stands as a singularity of power and principle. His shadows stretch endlessly, his influence undeniable, and his existence a lesson for all who dare to measure, control, or define the limits of the demon world. History will remember this not as a battle or a disruption, but as the emergence of a being who transcends rules entirely. Before we wrap up, take a moment and imagine this: a world where authority bends, magic falters, and inevitability itself takes form. That is the world Sung Jin-woo has carved, and the lesson is clear. True misfits aren't just rebels or challengers. They are forces that reshape reality itself. And with that, the story ends. For now,